everybody, and welcome to the Podcast, a podcast about podcasting from True Story FM. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Why, hello there.
Oh, so formal. A happy February to you, sir.
Yes, indeed. We're here in 2025, even.
We are here. It's taken us a little bit to get into our 2025 podcasting swing. We've been very busy with lots of things, but I'm excited to talk to you today about the podcast business in 2025. What do we have to look forward to? I've been reading up on the podcast business, and my goodness, Andy, there is some hair on fire takes about podcasting in 2025. And I just think we need to talk about what we're going to be thinking about this year.
Yeah, there's so many different ways that things could be growing and changing, and are podcasts going to get more political? Are they going to get less political? How's that going to shift? Are people going to continue reaching out globally and try getting a bigger draw around the world? I think one of the big things that we are hearing so much about, we've already been talking about it quite a bit, but we just keep hearing more and more of it as it evolves, is of course AI, artificial intelligence, the use of it in the podcasting space.
It's changing so fast. I feel like any conversation we have about AI in podcasting is going to be dated within about 35 minutes. What are we? Talk a little bit about your AI workflow briefly. What are you doing right now?
Well, I mean, there are some handy tools, and I mean, AI. There are elements of AI that I get. People can rightly be concerned about how it's being used as far as what it's adapting, what sort of information is it using to come up with stuff. But largely, like on my end, it really is a tool that I use quite a bit, like to help, for example, write show notes for each podcast. Once we finish the show, I'll edit it, and then I will run it through an AI transcription tool to give me a script of the podcast, not necessarily like at this point, I don't think the AI scripts, personally, I don't think the AI scripts are great enough to like put out as like an official transcript of the show. But I think it works great in the context of what then I use it for in my next step is I run it through an AI generator. I said, read this transcript and write show notes for me. Give me some bullet points and, give me a list of any links that we mention, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a really handy tool to kind of put that together, making sure I'm not necessarily leaving any links out that we mentioned. And then also just playing around with show art, just coming up with, stuff that's generally relatively safe. It doesn't, it's just something that can be used in context of the show when we're marketing it. Largely, that's how I have so far integrated AI into my workflow.
I think what I hear from people who are bearish about AI is that it makes stuff up, it's trash, it's like lowest common denominator. And I think, so much of that take comes from, my sense comes from lack of robust prompt engineering. Like prompts are still key. And if I look at your prompt, like you just said, hey, give me some bullets and write show notes, but that undersells what you have written in your prompt, which is extraordinary. And I think the number one thing you can do once you've already decided I'm going to use an AI language model is get into some sort of text expansion tool. Like, we use Text Expander to put your prompts in Text Expander. I have my prompts in Text Expander. They have fill-in fields that I can customize, but generally I'll get the same tone of prompt when I do that. And I think there is an ethical, I don't know if it's necessarily an ethical line. The line for me, I'll just speak for me. I use AI like you to create my starting point for show notes, which I then edit. In almost every case, there are still some shows that I handwrite all of my show notes because I have an affinity for that show in a different way, like an emotional connection for that show. But for shows that I'm not a part of, if I was not on the show, it's very challenging to write show notes without this assist because of the time it takes to listen to the show. And when I can throw AI at the show and then scrub through the transcript to verify, fact check, and things like that, it saves a lot of time. So our business is podcasting. We create podcasts. Our business is not show notes. Show notes is a tool that comes along with podcasting. That's where I sort of draw the line. I will also say, and one of the things that we have on our list of things to talk about in the coming weeks is, AI generation of audio, and we don't do that. Will we ever? I don't know. I think it's dangerous to say never, but our core business is our voices and the voices of the podcasters that work at True Story. And so I think it's safe to say the odds are near zero that we're going to be in the AI generation of voice business.
That being said, it is important to note, like, one of the great tools that Adobe provides is an actual enhancement tool of audio that is an AI enhancement tool that actually we do use pretty regularly to clean up audio. And that can help remove noise. And sometimes when a voice is a little muffled or something, it is using AI reading of the voice to help fix the voice. And so to that extent, there is some AI use in that element within what we're doing.
And it's hallelujah, amen, extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
Like, it takes very rough audio and makes great audio, right?
Yeah.
It really is an extraordinary tool. So hats off to the team at Adobe that's working on their podcasting, because that particular tool, I can't get enough of it. It's really great.
But even that has its issues, right? Like, as we are discovering, like, if somebody laughs, it thinks that the laugh is background noise and eliminates it. And so
nobody's funny on any of the shows.
So that's an element that we're like, okay, well, we need a workaround for that. So, I mean, it does, again, these are just tools that can help, but it's not, in none of the cases with the AI that we're using, is it in any way like the end all be all. Like, it all is just a tool that helps us do something quicker so that we can then take that, do what we need to continue working with it and deliver an actual good podcast.
I read this book that I've been recommending to folks more and more lately called Co-Intelligence by Ethan Molnick. Molnick. There might be an N in there. And it is a great book. And I think that it talks about AI, where we are with AI right now, and how without a lot of fear, but with a degree of skepticism that I think is important, and a healthy dose of how-to. And the term that comes out of that book is being the human in the middle, right? Like, being never give away 100% of your process to AI without a human in the middle to actually, do the prompt engineering on the front end and do the review and verify on the back end. Like, the process is changing, and, I think it's important to just be a part of it and not just hide and be angry all the time, because it's not like it's going away. I don't have a single tool on my system that doesn't have some AI part in it now, whether it's my task list or note taker, right? Everything's got it built in some way. I'd like to know how it works. I'd like to know what it's doing. And I think that's that's 2025 in AI for podcasting. Okay.
Yeah.
The next thing, the evolution of success metrics, constantly changing. I'm reading a lot about folks, successful podcasters, who are saying, we've got to switch from download numbers, just raw downloads, to engagement metrics, right? Not
Retention.
Just necessarily stream, but attention and community engagement. Like, what your audience is listening to the show, what percentage of your audience is actually engaging with you and creating community with one another around your show. And I think that's really interesting, looking at it from a listener behavior perspective, whether that's what percentage of your listeners that you get from your downloads actually make your Discord community, for example. And what are they doing in that Discord community? Of course, attention and retention rates are important, right? We definitely have Spotify and Apple doing, giving us stream data. If what percentage of your listening audience makes it to what percentage of your show when they're listening through. I think we've generally held the 80%, right? If 80% of your audience starts a given episode and makes it to 80% of your show, that's pretty successful. And that's a nice metric. It's something that feels safe for me in my head. Most people are getting most of the message of an episode for whatever reason that is. But I do think there's something to seeing the podcast as a bigger part of a larger community of thinkers, writers, speakers, listeners, right?
Yeah, I think that's especially moving forward. I mean, and it is interesting because there has been such a focus on downloads, as you said, and in the world of the advertisers and everything, they're wanting that sort of metric. And so when suddenly something involves like that, the financial backing of advertisers, like they're looking for something that they can use to track that sort of thing. But while it's good information to help know that sort of stuff, you're right. It isn't giving a sense as to, well, but is it a successful podcast? Are there people who are actually really paying attention to it and talking about it and everything? And that's the thing that you're talking about, is like that, the retention and people who are paying attention to it and everything. And I think that's like that actual engagement, I think is crucial. And it'll be interesting to see how that, how I'd like to think that in 2025, we're going to start seeing a shift to see more focus on that rather than just straight up downloads.
Well, I do too. And I'll go back to, a couple of years ago, one of our early sort of successful forays into this was working with Text Expander, where, they were looking at, overall download numbers for the show and the, downloads over 7 days, last 7, last 30, the typical metrics. And then we said, look, we have this burgeoning community on Discord that we opened up, and we've got 1,000 people in there, and they're all listeners of the show and users of the products that we recommend. Let's make that a part of this discussion, because it's a key part. Those 1,000 people are people who took action. They're part of the community that are of self-support. They're helping one another through their process. And that ended up being a really valuable partnership, because they came in and did a member-only workshop with us and converted a lot of people. Now, unfortunately, they got it kind of out of the individual marketing business. So they're just going for business clients. That's really not us anymore. But that period of our relationship was very, very strong because of looking at community building beyond the podcast. What has the podcast allowed you to create that you can leverage for growth and benefit of its members? I think that's, and because we've always looked at it like that, I don't think it's ever come off as shrill advertising on our part when we start talking to our members that way. So yeah. I think it's important. Definitely.
Yeah.
Local podcast communities. A lot of podcasters have been doing live events, but we've been playing with, and I'm a part of one of them for one of our shows, but there have been a number of pod chat communities that come up, essentially local book clubs around podcasts and podcast episodes. And I think creating resources around helping, depending on the show, of course, but creating resources around helping people to create pod clubs is an interesting thing that I want to poke at this year, right? How local connections, individual connections, can lead to deeper audience loyalty and engagement. So how do you help your local audience connect together in small groups without you necessarily being a part of it? Now, the show that I've been a part of, I was invited to join a pod chat for All the Feelings, where we work through once a month a single episode of one of our past seasons. Now, it moves pretty slowly, so now the podcast itself for All the Feelings is way ahead of where the pod chat is. But the fact that we get 10 or 12 people together, organized by the listeners of the show, to talk about the substance of a given episode has been incredibly powerful. I think we have a lot of podcasters who talk about, I want to do local live events, but what about the book club nature that makes podcasting so fun? I don't know of any. I have not done the exploration yet for who's doing this, what sort of resources can be created to support this kind of an event. But I think it's really cool. What do you think?
Yeah, it is really interesting. I mean, there are already growing local podcast communities. Like, I mean, I have one in town here where they get together monthly, and really it's just a chance to kind of get, it's podcasters getting together, sitting around and talking. But like, you can see like different types of communities starting to form from podcasts. That's the one that I'm more familiar with. But I mean, live events where you're actually doing a live recording of your show. Like, I've been listening to various iterations of that a decade or more on podcasts as people start doing that sort of thing. And as you start shifting into this sort of thing, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. You know, it does make me wonder, like, is there space to do things like that with some of the movie related podcasts we have, where it's like
Yes.
a movie club? You get together, everyone watches the movie, and then we get together and after they've listened to the episode, and we're all talking about it or something, you know?
Listen to the episode, have a discussion. Exactly. That's what I think. Because I've been to the podcast meetups too, and it's podcasters talking about podcasting. I really think it's important to help people engage in the content that you're creating and not just the business of making podcasts. And the reason I started thinking about this is because we were approached, we wrote the Unapologetically ADHD book, me and Nikki Kinzer, and everybody came back and said, you've got to create resources to help book clubs, existing book clubs, read and assess what you've written. And, here are the questions, here's that kind of a thing. And we're creating this portal on the website that says, hey, do you want to create a book club or use our book in your book club? Here's how you do it. I think it's interesting to evolve that to pod chats. How many small groups get together and talk about the substance of a specific episode? I am bullish on that. I think it's fun. I love being a part of it, and I think more people need to do it. There you go.
Obviously, it's different in your situation because you're actually one of the podcasters who's able to be there. But I do think, just in the scope of the book club aspect of it, I think it's important to just state there's also value in doing it when the podcaster isn't there. And I think that's part of what you're trying to do, is create these clubs of people who get together and just listen and then talk about it.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And I would say I was the last person invited to join the pod chat, right? That was, I almost didn't start going because I felt like it was going to be surgery without anesthesia. But it turns out it was really valuable and fun, and it's created quite a community, mostly around food and then podcasts. So yeah. I like it. I like the idea. All right.
That's very cool.
What's next? I've got this on the list. I'm calling it the dominance of video podcasting. That's the thing, right?
You say sigh.
Yeah.
I don't.
I know. So first of all, this makes me feel old. I started in broadcasting. I'm a video guy. Like, I know how. I know how to video. There's no understating the YouTube's growing importance in the podcasting space. And obviously, YouTube is a video platform, video first platform. But if you're not, making use of YouTube's RSS feed, if you're not a video podcast, make sure you get your audio podcast into YouTube using the RSS playlist discovery. It is very handy, and people are coming to expect it. I started thinking more about this because I have a friend who has never listened to a podcast because the podcast app was too impenetrable, just couldn't work the podcast app into his life. But the YouTube app he uses every day, and just said one day, I wonder if I can find Pete's podcast on YouTube. Found it, listens to it on his walks, on his commutes. Like, that discoverability in YouTube is really important. Now, if you want to become a video show on YouTube and record the podcast recording and release it as a video playlist of your show, do it. That's great. And recognize that optimizing for YouTube's discoverability is a learning curve, and be ready for that. We are exploring more and more of that, mostly Andy. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you think about video?
Well, yeah, and to your end, I mean, right now I'm still in the phase where I'm just getting a handle on shifting shows that we've recorded into just the video versions that we're releasing. Like, as you just mentioned, there is a whole algorithm and way of learning how to work within YouTube to enhance discoverability of shows that, I'm still also trying to figure that whole side of things out, because it's going to be important so that people can actually find these shows there. But I mean, just the first step was like, how realistic is it to take a show that we're recording video of, but largely doing so as just for members to kind of live stream? Largely, it's because we're doing an audio version of it. But like, how easy is it to then take what I'm getting from the video feed and then converting it to converting it to the actual video edited version that plays. And that's, it is additional time and energy that you need to put into it. There are tools that can help that make it move a lot faster, so you don't have to sit there and actually edit the entire thing from, cut. But it is something that does take time. And then you have to figure out, okay, now how do I market it? So it is an additional element of your show. But if I definitely think that it's going to be increasingly important as video podcasting becomes a core part of just podcasting in general. And everybody, I keep talking to people who listen to podcasts regularly, but the way they listen to it is, like Pete said, they open up YouTube and they play it, whether it's the audio version or a video version of just people talking, and they will listen to it that way. And I just find that that's interesting, that it seems to be more and more how people are tuning in.
Yeah, I think understanding YouTube as a premier podcast client or YouTube Music as a premier podcast client is really important. Same thing with Spotify, though, I sigh again with Spotify. They're trying. But they're also encouraging uploads of video. They don't have as easy a mechanism for including a bunch of video in Spotify yet. Here's hoping they figure that out. But I would say YouTube is the premier sort of brand for video shows of podcasts.
Yeah.
Okay. This is where I'm making a prediction that is counter to exactly what we just said.
Oh, okay.
I think we're going to see an even greater resurgence of audio-only content this year.
Interesting. Okay.
Hot take. Because I think producers who have said, oh, I need to ride the video wave, are realizing that it's expensive to do to the level of those that have invested a lot of money in doing it well, and that they are reminded of the intimacy and connection of the audio medium, that there is still a need for people to be able to listen to something while they're on a commute, while they're walking around, while they're doing something. And I think that having an audio-only show that fills that space, that level of intimacy, and doesn't make you feel like you're missing out if you're not watching the video is important. I sometimes feel that way when I listen to shows that have included video that I just want to listen to while I'm driving. And then they talk about things that are on the video that I wish they would just describe, because I don't want to watch the video right now. I'm driving, and I sure as hell don't want to watch it twice, right? Listen to it once and then watch it again. So yeah. I think that enhancing real-time sort of audience engagement in an audio medium I'm bullish on that this year. I think I am in favor. I'm an audio guy. I love audio. I love audio podcasting, and we're doing more video, but that doesn't change where my heart is. And I'm saying this to put it out in the universe because I want it so bad.
I'm curious. I definitely am curious how that's going to work. I mean, podcasting started audio. Video has kind of become an increasingly important part of it. But yeah, I mean, I don't think video is just going to flat out kill audio. I think we'll always have the audio stuff. I think more and more podcasters who do narrative shows, for example, are getting better and better at crafting narrative audio shows that you don't need a video for. And sure, then they go and they get picked up by some distributor who wants to actually produce a TV version of said show. Like, that keeps happening. But I think I do think that there will consistently be great audio. I don't think that it's, I think audio is, I don't think the video versions are going to just flat out kill audio, but I do think video will grow, and I think audio will grow. I just think it's the natural way that it's going to happen. So yeah, I think we're going to get better versions of both.
That's why you're the head of video at True Story. I just made you that. I'm going to get you new business cards.
New business cards.
Yeah. Perfect. Head of video. Yep. That's it. I think this should be the year of, with all of this, like, just to wrap up, let's continue, podcasters, to think in terms of what we can do, right? Think in terms of format experimentation. I did a guest appearance at University of Oregon in the School of Journalism last week, and it was fascinating to hear the number of people who were just struggling with like thinking about shows. I asked them what their favorite podcasts are, the ones that listen to podcasts. And the podcasts were invariably still the biggest shows that made the transition from NPR generally to a podcast feed, right? They're originally, talk shows from some other medium. And all I could say is, look, you've got to listen to podcasts that were born to be podcasts, right? Let's move on a little bit from This American Life, from Radiolab. Let's think about what we've learned from listening to those shows and create something really dynamic and new, and think in terms of storytelling through soundscapes and not necessarily just doing what the news shows have done. And I think it's fun to hear young people get really, really creative and think in ways that I never have. And I think that's inspirational. But it all starts with bathing in podcasts that started as podcasts, not just NPR shows.
I like the metaphor has now gone from audio to video to a physical medium where we're bathing within it.
Yeah, we're going to bathe in a video of podcasts. It's a real Cronenberg. You got to catch up.
That's fantastic. Well, sounds good to me. I love it.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll put the link to the Co-Intelligence book. Everybody should read it. It's a short audiobook. It's like 4.5 hours audiobook, but it's worth reading. Back to the AI point, because it's here. AI is here, and it can really save a lot of time for you and those you love, I guess. Thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. We appreciate your time and attention. You're the best. I'm Pete Wright, and that's Andy Nelson. And we'll see you right back here next time on the podcast about podcasting from True Story FM.